Welcome to Talks and Sips podcast. I am Jess.
And I'm Cecy.
And you are?
I'm Ron.
Sheena.
Oh, sorry, Sheena.
I am Sheena.
I'm Ron.
Hi, I'm Star.
Just not to, I keep realizing that I keep saying Cecy in the intros, but like I go by Cecy.
She does. Now everyone's going to know her as Cecy, and she
Yeah.
wants to be known as Cecy.
I know. Okay, I'm Cecy.
There you go. And be like, this bitch changed her name halfway through the show. 8 episodes later, she's Cecy. Like,
Just edit that one part into like all of the sections.
I know, I'm Cecy.
like, what's wrong with her mouth right there? Yeah. like, okay. Our podcast is a timeline breakdown about occurrences that happened around the world simultaneously after the pandemic hit, and where we all were in those moments and how we coped. In the previous episode, we spoke on topics such as the first man launched, backed by NASA and SpaceX since 2011, the events that unfolded the night George Floyd died, and the protests that ensued. I want to give a huge thank you to our guests, Star, Sheena, and Ron, for sharing insight on such tough topics. And honestly, for sharing perhaps a perspective that some may have never had to take into consideration, and thus has been an eye-opening experience for them. Let's jump back in.
The last question we asked you guys was, where were you when the protests first erupted, and what was running through your minds? Your perspectives were genuine, and you know, it brought up things that I hadn't even thought of. So it's really nice to just hear a genuine, this is how I took it, from 3 different perspectives, along with how we took it.
The protests that have spread for some time now aren't so simple outside of unjust treatment and the hunger for justice, right? There are so many factors ranging from perceptions of police brutality, non-perceptions and actualities, systemic racism, and unhealthy social stereotypes. The thing that goes missed, in my opinion, is like the empathetic human nature part of it. The part where, you know, there's just so much aggression towards the need to be heard and the need to feel like included. So yeah, let's get in there and let's go deeper, yeah? Where did you guys grow up? What was that experience like? And I know in our intros we kind of talked about it, but is there anything specific to your childhood in regards to like where you lived that you can recall that perhaps will give listeners insight into your experience?
I can start. So I grew up all over. I come from a blended family. I had a very strong foundation in my godparents, and they're Hispanic. They were Hispanic. And then I had my mom, who was a white woman, and she loved to move. We would move all the time. I've literally lived like all over. And that being a mixed child growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was not easy. But I was forced to make friends, new people everywhere I went. It was either that or chill with my brother, who, well, like, you know, having multiple siblings, like that's, yeah, you want to make friends. Yeah. So it was never hard, but it was never easy, if that makes sense. For the longest time, I was probably 13 when I moved to Texas, and I actually really got connected with my African American roots, like my Black roots. My mom was white and my dad wasn't in my life. And like I said, I had my Hispanic godparents. And so I thought I was all 3 because they were my godparents and that's what their culture was. So I would tell people, yeah, my name's Star Dawn Whitaker Lopez. Like that's who I thought I was.
Right.
Not real at all. But I mean, don't get me wrong, like I'm thankful that I had exposure to that culture. But it wasn't until I was 13 and I moved to Texas for the first time that I actually got in touch with my father's culture, which it was shocking. I didn't realize that I was lacking in the knowledge of the history and the culture. until I really was exposed to it. And that's not anybody's fault, it just is what it was. But I am super thankful that I grew up the way I grew up, and I was able to see different cultures and really be forced to love people for who they are, because I had to force myself to be accepted. So, yeah, that was me.
Sheena, you could go.
So I grew up in Lancaster, California. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I lived in Los Angeles for the first half of my life up until the age 8. And then my mom got married and we moved to the suburbs, which a lot of families were doing at the time because Lancaster was very affordable for being able to buy a house. I grew up in a very blended family. Like, if you look at us, we're every shade of the rainbow. My older sister is dark skinned, but she has straight hair. And then my middle sister, we're like the same skin tone. We have curly hair. My mom is white. My dad's black. And my cultural experience more is I grew up, and I hate saying this, but I grew up not seeing race in the sense. Not that I wasn't aware of it, but I didn't associate people initially by their race. And so that kind of helped me just feel like it was more about, what kind of music you're into or like how you dress or something is how I blended in. And at the time we moved to Lancaster, it was really nice because it was around the time a lot of people from LA were moving to Lancaster, so our school got diversified really quickly. And so compared to my cousins or maybe my older sisters, they all call me kind of whitewashed because I, listen to rock music and I was like in the anime club and I love art. But I always had kind of the underlying awareness of my blackness, and not from a point of like feeling like I was discriminated against, but more of a sense of pride that I was a black woman, but also highly aware that I wasn't that black, like my cousins always made fun of me because, again, I was super whitewashed. But my dad definitely made it a point to kind of remind me of my blackness and make sure I didn't forget that. And his side of the family is from Louisiana, and they moved to San Francisco when my dad was young. And so my grandma was very active kind of in the, the protest and the black movement during that time of the like late 60s, 70s. And she was actually affiliated with the Black Panther Party. And so I have a lot of pride to my black culture, and I may be, half black or whatever percentage that I am, but I always associated myself as a black woman.
Oh, nice. Okay. Thank you for sharing, the both of you.
Hey, Ron.
Cecy
Sorry.
Yes.
Your camera's where's your phone?
Right there. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. I can see why you chose the three of us to do this. Because I just from looking at it and hearing both of you all's answers, we are all similar in some type of way. We fit the meme of stop telling your black kids that they talk white. That's toxic. For me, I was raised with my grandparents. My grandparents took me away from my mom when I was 7, and my mom, living with my mom was an experience. As I got older, I realized it was an experience. When I was younger, I was like, oh man, this is fun. Like, we're moving a lot, we're sleeping in a car, we're doing all these things. Like, my mom is like in and out of relationships, and I was like, well, this is cool, but as I got older, I was like, wow, that was very, very toxic. And my grandparents really wanted to shield me away from that. And I'm gonna piggyback on something that Star said earlier. Just being growing up in LA, like I grew up in Inglewood. I also grew up in Ladera Heights, as well. I went to private school all of my life. Even went to a private university here, in LA in LA County. But there were times where I grew up too black for the whites at times and too white for the blacks, and that was mainly reason because my grandparents had always had me in things outside of my demographic. Like I had piano lessons growing up. Like we had a piano in our home. I had tennis lessons growing up. I still play tennis today. I had golf lessons growing up. I don't play as much golf as I did as a kid. I, I've always done things out of my demographic. I mean, in college, I played lacrosse.
Wow.
Yeah, I look at some of my interests, like, I love classical music. I love opera. I love every bit of music besides country. That's the only music I don't listen to.
I don't know if your visit's gonna go well when you go visit Star then.
Now, but I take that back. There is a song that I do listen to, and it is actually a country song, and I didn't know it. It's like it's It's a 1:15.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I know that
and
song.
I need you now. I didn't know that was a country. I didn't know that was a country song. Yeah, that's a country song, right?
I think so.
Their country. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know that was a country song. But I was sheltered, but I wasn't. My grandma had always had like this protective hold on me because I was her baby, Like we weren't rich or anything, but we didn't struggle. Yeah.
But it sounds almost like you didn't necessarily struggle, but even within like your family dynamic, like maybe even cousins, right? Because you're like, oh, all of you have that. Like, well, you guys are saying I'm whitewashed. Like, well, I don't have to not, and it's not even being a whitewash thing. It's like, I'm just educated.
Exactly. Well, see, none of my So if you like, I remember a friend of mine would actually, an old friend of mine would actually tell like your sister, like, I'm completely different from my family. Like I am, like, if you ever meet my family, I was like, oh, okay. And that's my grandparents. Like I did a lot of things, and I still do a lot of things, outside of my demographic. But I was always aware of, who I was, right. And I never lost hold of that, and I owe that to my grandfather. Like I remember there was one time I went to a bat mitzvah, and it was at a country club out here in West LA, and I remember my grandfather dropped me off, and I remembered he had always told me, you're doing all these things, but you can't do what they do. That's why you always have to be, twice as best.
That's good.
If I hope that if that's confusing, so I can try to clean that up a bit. Did you guys ever watch Scandal?
Mm-mm. I
Yeah. So do you remember when her dad was yelling at her in the airport hangar, and he was like, "What did I always teach you? You got to be twice as best." And you kind of, and I dial that back into like the college admission scandal, with all
Mm-hmm.
with all of the white kids getting in trouble with their parents,
right.
Because they were doing all of this.
They're paying them off.
But yeah.
They're enjoying the rowing team.
Yeah,
and
well,
stuff.
yeah, and it's like you got it. It's like my I'm losing my train of thought. I've been drinking too much. I'm kidding.
Ron.
No, I just, you can't not do what they do. Like my punishment would be harsher than Johnny's punishment if we did, like, if we're out there smashing windows
Mm-hmm.
and someone catches us. You get what I'm saying? So like I've never lost track. I am consciously aware. I know that I'm a black man, and I wouldn't say I'm like prideful in that, but I know that, and it is hard for me at times, but I'm really good at adaptability, and I've always been able to adapt in certain situations and certain outcomes or certain fields or whatever. But yeah.
That's rad.
I want to piggyback on that a little bit because I know exactly what you're saying. The idea that you may be accepted or you may be present but you're not fully accepted, right?
Yes, yes, that's what I was like. Thank you.
And
yes.
and the idea is that you're always kind of functioning with that veil of being other. So if I was, I played guitar in high school and I was the black girl in the guitar class, right? Like it was always kind of known that I was the black girl doing something different than what typical black girls would do. Or if I was like in anime or I went to conventions, like it's like, oh, you're the black girl cosplaying. That's different, that's exciting, or good for you, but it's not culturally accepted. And I think of kind of how that pressure that our parents kind of put on us to try to do more but not forget our blackness.
Yes.
Because it's like it's like, okay, well, we moved to a better neighborhood so you can give me a better quality of life, but don't act too much like them. Don't forget yourself.
Yes.
Remember that you're black.
Yes.
And that's very confusing as a kid because you're just trying to fit in. You're trying to, not do anything to make yourself stand out too much. Or you just like want to be accepted by your peers, but also you have the burden of whenever somebody says something, off the cuff of having to be the one to correct them because you are the only minority in the room.
And that kind of leads into our next question. You have your family telling you like,
oh my God.
You have your family telling you, don't forget this part of yourself. And that leads to, do you have family members that because of their experience, they've experienced a disadvantage based on the color of their skin due to unfair stereotypes placed on them that they put on you, if that makes sense?
So like I had mentioned before, I grew up with my mom and her family, and my mom was white. And so my siblings were white as well. I'm the baby and the favorite. So, but I didn't grow up with my dad. My dad's people all come from Louisiana. And so I wasn't close with them. I think I met him for the first time when I was 12. So I didn't have that. I didn't grow up with siblings or family members that I was aware of that had these prejudices against them per se. I could be very ignorant to that maybe there was white privilege. Like, I mean, we were not privileged. I didn't realize that we struggled because my godparents kept that from us. They didn't let us know that we were struggling. And so I don't know that my family has the opposite of what my dad's side would have incurred. But I do know that it didn't matter where I went from, even when I was little, it was, what are you? You're something. What are you? And I remember, oh, you should blow out your hair, because I'm a product of the 80s. Like flat irons weren't a thing for a long time. You should love it. You should, and because it was like, because it was from non-Black people, it was, oh, you should blow out your hair. You should make your hair straight. Like you'll blend in more. And then when I would be approached by people of color, they're like, oh, like you should press out your hair. Like it'd be so nice. Like hot press. And I was like, hot press? Like I don't know what that is. Like I don't want that. Like what? Like why can't my hair just be what it
Hold
is?
the ear.
Right. But at the same time, I look back at photos now, and I realized my hair was, I had a little tiny afro for most of my childhood because my mom didn't know how to do my hair. And so things like that are just like kind of like what I grew up with. So I can't really speak into what, because my dad, he has other children. And I know I have 2 brothers from him that I've never met, but I know that they're grown Black men that I'm sure have been through the struggle or have had some struggle in their lifetime.
Is there any desire in regards to the chaos / cancel culture out there that you hope would change? If so, what type of approaches could a person take to maybe come out of that or, not?
I think for me, sorry, can I go first? I'm sorry.
You're good.
For me, I'm sorry. Yeah, for me, I'm always on the I always see. I major in political science, so I always see both sides of each issue. I do think that people do take offense of cancel culture, meaning, oh, you're shutting down someone's like First Amendment rights. I don't see that. I see it at times where it's like this person needs to take full responsibility of, their actions, whether it's past and present. There are some things, then on the other end, I feel like, okay, let's relax. So for example, Space Jam 2 trailer just came out, and what's that? The skunk, Pepe Le Pew. Yeah, he's not going to be in it. I understand that, but it's a god dang cartoon, and I understand like the culture that it represents, but then I go think about, man, Johnny Bravo must be sweating because I know they're coming for him soon. You get what I'm saying? But I understand, and I do get that, but I feel like it's not a human being, it's a cartoon, like I do feel like there are some things in which we kind of do go off the rails. And then if I circle back to Dr. Seuss,
right, which is something that recently
came up. So much misinformation that was passed on because people were thinking, oh, we can't read Dr. Seuss anymore. My kid can't read Green Eggs and Ham, when it was literally the Seuss Enterprise. The publisher, Dr. Seuss, had decided to get rid of 6 books, not all of them, 6 books that depicted racial images of painting, African Americans with big noses, with big lips. And you all know those images, right. You know the images that they were portraying. And it's like, it's so much stuff gets, misconstrued, where you got one side saying this thing about cancel culture, and then you got the other side saying, no, you're missing the bigger picture. So that's where I'm at with cancel culture. Hope that makes sense.
I was actually going to ask that follow-up question to all of you. Do you think, like Ron just said, it's a cartoon? Like, he understands why it's happening, but it's a cartoon. So do you guys think that is taking away from the bigger pictures and what might be the bigger problem? Or is it something where you think, oh, if we get this out of the way, generations down the line, it'll stop there?
Right. Is it a big enough point now that in maybe 3 decades, when you have a new set of kids, like it's something that won't have to be an issue later?
Well, I do want to jump in on that because I don't think people are taking it too far with the cartoon. Because if you really think about it, this was in everybody's house. We grew up with these cartoons, and we were kind of fed these social norms through these cartoons at an early age. So, Pepe Le Pew, like, he was literally like...
He was wilding, don't get me wrong. Yeah. He was wilding. Don't get me wrong, he was wilding.
But like, if we take it through, and I think this happens a lot of times with a lot of cartoons, we're like, oh, that didn't age well, right? But it's like, it's a part of you know, the zeitgeist of like addressing these things that aren't okay, calling them out as not being okay, and then moving forward. So they can either like, you know, change Pepe Le Pew and he's like, I'm a feminist now, like, you know, your choice no means no, like, but you know, growing up he like legit was like assaulting that other skunk, and like that's not cool. And like as we're adults now, just think of like that imagery was fed to little kids, and that little kids were in like imitating that on the playground, and then they grew up thinking that that's not okay. So like I think people are wilding about it right now because it's like, you know, the right-wing media just blew it up like, oh, they're canceling a cartoon. But it's like, what, you know, we should be addressing these past like situations of like not okayness, and like taking them through a lens that's a part of growing up. Like, you know, we don't have minstrel shows because that's not cool anymore. Like that's not okay, that's not the social norms. And there's a lot of times where people thought that was okay back then because, you know, they didn't have minorities in the room to call that out as not okay.
And that's a good point that you make. Like kids do watch that, and whether they're aware of it or not, like a big argument is, oh, I watched it and I'm fine. It's like, okay, you're fine, but look at the world around you. Obviously some people took it as a different way. They saw it, oh, cartoons could do it, maybe I could get away with it, you know?
The big thing here that I think everyone seems to kind of be leading to is that it's almost like self-accountability. There's a lot of so obviously a kid can't be self-accountable because he's a kid. Like there's only a level of morale and even like this is good, this is bad that they're equipped to handle. So obviously parenting, and not all parents are equipped to be parents. Like let's go there if you want to go there. But the big thing is that, you know, because on the counter side they'll say, well, you know, what are their parents letting them watch? Are they la 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 la, right? Again, not everyone is equipped to do that. So the big thing here, and in regards to like things being brought up and kind of almost being dissected, is like, well, there should be room for accountability, and there should be a difference between the self-accountability that's happening for the better tomorrow, for the better of the future generations, versus like, oh, now I'm gonna drag your ass until tomorrow. Right? So there's a difference in grace, I think, even in that world of it.
I feel like you're part of the problem.
And I mean, sorry, I just want to jump in real quick. To be fair, like these are the same parents who were like canceling Harry Potter and like are in an uproar over like the Little Nas video, right? So it's like I can only take what they have to say with a grain of salt.
And like if we talk about like the Little Nas, I've never seen the video. I just saw like that in, you know, the ending that people are up in arms about, you know. But it's so crazy because when I was little, you know, I used to watch South Park, and I really do think Little Nas brought out a lot of homophobia in people, because like I said, when I was little, South Park movie had the devil in it with Saddam Hussein, and they had a gay relationship.
Like
but I think,
chillin'.
You know, just like chilling, you know, like they had like a gay relationship, you know. So I look at that was like, well, Saddam Hussein wasn't loved. You get what I'm saying? He wasn't a likable guy. But then I do see the other part with Lil Nas X. Like I just found out that his song, I guess Old Town Road, you know, that was a hit song, like a #1 hit song. Like kids love that song. So I think it gets to the point where it was like, okay, you do have kids looking up to this like individual, you know. But I was also on because I am Christian, and I was also on the side of like, don't feed into it. You know, you don't have to feed into it. I get that, you know, that's like bothering you, and you know, it's like, but don't feed into it. You know, because
turn the TV off.
Right.
Exactly. You can literally turn it off. You know, like I didn't pay any mind to it. I was like, because that's how I feel. That's how the world is, you know, and that's how it, you know, that's how it's always going to be. So, yeah.
There's, just to play devil's advocate, there's people that can't just turn off the TV. Like when I was growing up, I watched Looney Tunes, Pepe Le Pew, didn't affect me in that manner. However, we weren't allowed to watch the Smurfs because Gargamel was a wizard. So, or a sorcerer, or whatever you want to call it. So like there's all these different levels. But as far like what I wanted to say earlier, when we were talking about just like cancel culture in general, just like canceling people for things that they've said in the past, or statements that they've made, or their viewpoints or whatever. If we're not part of the solution and coaching and loving these people and helping them see their ignorance, and whether they want to stick with their ignorance or not, that's on them. But if we're not helping be a part of the solution, then we're a part of the problem.
That's good.
And I think canceling people is just a safe way to say, no, we don't agree with you. You think different from us, and that's not okay. I personally don't agree with that. And I also don't agree with the cancel culture of not necessarily tearing down statues like Confederate things and like all of that was happening. For me, it's like, okay, we're gonna make a conscious decision to not support that anymore. We're gonna bring information and truth and light to people who maybe were not aware. But if we cancel it completely, then we lose the history. We lose our foundation of remembering our past mistakes. And that is just setting us up in the future to make even worse mistakes, because we have to remember so that way we can learn from it. Yeah.
I think there is something. Sorry.
I do get that what you said there, Star, because like when I look at, and just for me, being a lover of history and look at Confederacy and stuff, those are only put up 40 years ago. Every statue within the South, from Robert E. Lee, all of that, those were put up during Jim Crow. Every last single statue in the South that was the Confederate general, all of that, those were actually put up during Jim Crow because they needed to keep they needed to just, keep the line going, saying, who was boss and who was still in charge. Like that term, like the South will rise again. I never understood that term. What does that mean? But yeah, a lot, because I get what you're saying about like tearing down. I strongly believe some of that stuff does need to be in museums and not out in the open. Like I remember, J. Cole has a song about a school where he's from, and it's 85% Black, but it's called Robert E. Lee.
I kind of want to play off of kind of both what you guys are saying. So I think there is a place for us in the current moment to kind of correct and proceed, right? So there is, people were tearing down statues of Lincoln. And I was like, there's a ability to correct and proceed where you educate, you keep it, and then you move forward. But there is also a sense to kind of what Ron was saying, where certain statues were put up during the Jim Crow era to invoke fear as a reminder. So it's the only historical sense that they had was the fear. So I agree with like getting those out, putting them in the museum, whatever. But if it's like, it's like, this is a statue of Lincoln and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, this is a part of history. This wasn't put here from a sense of fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, taking on Lincoln, bunch of idiots. Like, those are just people who don't, those are just people who don't know.
They just wanted to be a part of it.
Look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, for example, there were people, across the pond in the UK who were trying to tear down statues of, like, Winston Churchill. Like, I get it. Like, Winston Churchill, he has said things in the past mainly about Africans.
He was hella racist.
Hella racist. I do get that. But just reading
he
about
had other contributions to history.
And the world, the world at that, just the Brits were literally on their own in the early stages of World War II. And if it wasn't because of him, I guarantee you pretty much all of Europe would be speaking Germany right now. I'm German, sorry, German,
We get
German, German right now, there are some things like, yeah, there are people who just don't know any better, like trying to tear down statues of, Lincoln, or another funny thing, when you guys were little, and you learned about George Washington, one of the first, if you ask any kid, one of the first thing you learn about is, George Washington's teeth. We were told and taught that George Washington's teeth were made of wood. He had he had dentures, but they weren't. They were actually slave teeth. And that's people, and that's the history people don't want to talk about, trust me, I am extremely patriotic, but there are some things where it's I know there are people who are just like me, they can't fathom the truth.
Yeah. I mean, I think that probably 80% of the history of the United States hasn't been told.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. This year alone, these past 2 years, I give a standing ovation to HBO because they had two shows that done very well, and it talked about the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre. And that was Watchmen and Lovecraft. Sorry, yeah, thank you. Lovecraft. Yep. Thank you. That was Watchmen and Lovecraft, Country. And you can go back and you can see news articles about Google searches about Tulsa, Oklahoma. I knew about Tulsa, Oklahoma when I was 13. I just had my English literature teacher from high school, who's actually my barber now,
awesome.
who actually just I know it's our relationship is so funny, but he's my barber now, and we read Huckleberry Finn in high school, and there's a part in Huckleberry Finn where they were going up the river and someone had died off the boat, and they had asked about, oh, where's so and so, and it goes, oh, it doesn't matter, just another, he's gone, just another nigga dead, and it was just and they moved past it. So
all right,
so my teacher, we were getting our haircut, he had just got done watching Lovecraft Country, and he had just found out about Tulsa, Oklahoma, last year. And I told him about it. I knew since I was 13, 14. He was like, well, why you never said anything in high school when we were reading Huck Finn? When I said that line, you could have went, oh yeah, Mr. Murray, just like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that happened, but yeah. So
in that way though, sorry to interrupt. In that way though, one of the questions I did want to ask you guys was here is something that your teacher didn't even know about, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of misinformation, but there's a lot of lack of knowledge in certain areas too, which is why things like this are so important. Having these dialogues that people can listen to is so important, because by some weird way, I stumble upon different podcasts all the time, right? And then I learn different things. I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that. And it's just instant. And now I know. And now whatever I didn't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. So now you know, right? So in this case, do you guys believe that it's possible for people for someone to unlearn ideas and for, behavior to be improved and changed based off of newfound knowledge?
I do. I'll pipe in there because, my partner is, he's white. He's pretty white. He's, grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, which is, a blue collar town. And there's a lot of things that they still have a busing system out here. To this day, they bus colored kids into white neighborhoods.
Wow.
I know.
And so, he didn't grow up with a lot of, kids of color who, even if there was kids of color, they weren't outspoken in the school. And so when we were watching Lovecraft Country, and there was that scene of the sundown town, like, he was upset by it. Like, he was like physically upset by it. He's like, I can't believe this cop, he's an asshole, like bothering these people. I was like, this was a real thing that happened. And when people think of like sundown towns, they think of the South, but majority of the sundown towns were located in the North. So there was this veiled racism in the North, and the North is like, in the history of America, it's more shown as like, you know, the
Right.
the
That was your
accepting
Captain
part
America.
of America. You know, they didn't have slaves and stuff, right? But like, you know, they had things like sundown towns or, you know, paper bag tests. And so they don't teach that here. Like, there was a school here that, or maybe it wasn't here, but I remember hearing about it this year, that was able to elect out of teaching Black History Month stuff. And, you know, it's ridiculous that, you know, you can elect to just bypass a whole part of American culture that people in America don't realize is
Right.
American culture.
Yes,
And so,
that is so good. Yeah, no, because there are still currently sundown towns today. Like, I have a
yeah, I don't feel comfortable driving or like, we went, sorry, Ron, but like, we went up north last year in August, and went camping, and we went to this like
Oh, it was so beautiful.
town in the middle of nowhere. It was beautiful, and like, you know, we kayaked, did some white people shit. It was great, but I I was highly aware the whole time of how many eyes were on me. And like, I had individual braids in my hair, like I still had color, you know, and everything. And I just like felt, we went into this one like general store, like in general store by any means. Like, you could buy like a pot there, you could buy bait. Like, and I remember like telling my boyfriend, I was like, can we leave? Because I just felt uncomfortable, because I felt like every aisle we turned down, there was somebody just like staring at us.
Yeah.
And that we were like an interracial couple. And then like, another thing is that my boyfriend didn't even realize that like interracial marriages were legal like not that long ago. And like, last year was like an anniversary of like it being, you know, legalized. And like, he couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you're dating a Black girl? Like, and I'm like, it's those things that it's like, if, again, like you said, if you don't know what you don't know. But it is important to try to make the changes so that this kind of education can be, you know, put in the schools, which means voting in the like not fun elections where they vote superintendents and stuff like that, because those are the ones who, you know,
And people
change
forget about
the day
that.
to day.
Yes, people forget about your local elections, the local stuff, propositions, like local city stuff, county stuff. All of that stuff, is just as important as a presidential election every 4 years. Just
we
as
have
important.
one on Tuesday
Okay.
for a school superintendent.
Yeah. And mind you, and you got to, and see, people don't vote enough in those, and that's how you get the same superintendent, or just like even with midterm elections, the same congressman or the same senator for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
You know, and they've already had this mindset of how they knew things were when they
Right.
grew up.
So in regards to the officer, right, that, you know, Officer Chauvin, or whatever his, Chauvin? Yeah.
I think so.
Like, what would you hope the end result would be for him? And then with that, like, based off that result, what would you hope that would transpire to? Or if that would make a change, or, you know, because it's monumental, something. And again, because it's not, like, unfortunately, it's not, they're not making it about George Floyd. It's about this officer, right? Like, we talked about that. So, but can something for the George Floyds of the world come from this?
Right.
Ladies?
Yeah. So my hope for the outcome is justice will be served. Do I think anything is going to change? No. Because I'm cynical, and I've seen, you know, too much, too long, in the, the whole history of America. Like we'll get one thing and then we'll be set back 200 years, So
Right.
will this time will he be, will justice be served? Yes, because I think the evidence against him is so overwhelming that there's no way to like cover it up or shove it under the rug, or he's now the scapegoat for that whole police district. Do I think that something like this will happen again? Yes, 100%. I'm mentally bracing for it. So I think again, the people who just woke up to this last year can't really fathom the thought process that nothing will change. But I think people in the Black community are mentally prepared that we may get one, but we won't win all of them.
Yeah, my answer is probably not a popular answer. I wish that it didn't matter what the officer's color was or what George Floyd's color was. He was a human and his life was taken, and this man should be held accountable, especially because he's on a pedestal as a police officer. He took an oath to protect and serve, and he was given a gun. His body was trained to be a lethal weapon, and he should be held to a higher standard. That's what I think. My prayer for this trial is that people that have had blinders on, that those blinders have been removed and the truth gets filtered through, and people will be able to hear things correctly and in truth and not into interpretation, that there won't be, it'll be facts and not opinions, and that it won't be tried. I know it already is being tried in the public, but that public opinion won't matter, that the people that are responsible for making the decisions will stand up and do what's right.
And Star, I kind of want to hop in on that, because I think, me personally, like, I wish race didn't matter either, and that's not why I'm concerned about things changing. It's not about the race. It's not about the race of the individuals involved. It's about the systematic racist legislation that has been put in place that protects these police officers from accountability. Like, I want to be able to, if I need to, call my local police officer if I'm in a crisis and ask for help. But the cards are stacked against us, and the way that they are given the benefit of the doubt with the law behind them is what makes it unfair. And so, like, yes, I think that's the goal, is that race is not a factor, right? It's like, it's not Black Lives Only Matter, it's Black Lives Matter too, right? So it's like, we want everyone to be treated equally. So if we are, have the cops called on us for a fraudulent dollar bill, then we will be approached calmly and not seen as a threat because of our size or anything, and we can get like a ticket and just go about our way.
With that being said, actually, it leads to my next question. It was, statistically proven COVID-19 affected minorities and people of lower incomes harder versus the folks with more wealth. If someone is in a place, if someone is like in a dire situation, what is a perspective that can be offered to someone to fight the need to commit a crime in order to survive? In your life, have you ever, personally felt that strain? Like, I mean, I'm going to give you an example. It's going to be a really bad example. This is a personal example. At one point in my life, I was just really, really shitty at managing my money. I'm really good about it now, but I was really bad. And I remember like having to go to work, and I was going to college, to Long Beach City College, and I had my car, and I was like 2 days away from getting paid. And I was running out of gas, And so I was like, what do I do? Like, and I don't even think at that time that we really had like Uber or anything like that. Now I'm aging myself, but I did go to college forever, guys. Real talk. It took forever. Right. But the big thing was that like I had a bike and I was like, all right, I got to make this gas last till Friday. So I like drove to the college, which is halfway to my job. I parked my car at the college because I had the little ticket, and I rode my bike the rest of the way. But I've also remember being like 13 and being like, I can't afford this lipstick at the. I remember it being like a Big Lots, like, and I grabbed it. Sorry, Big Lots. You know what I mean? But,
business.
like a $2 lipstick at 13. But like with that being said, we know for a fact that COVID-19 wasn't fair for everyone. Like if you had more money, that means you had better resources. It means that you weren't living with as many people. You don't have to have 5 people living in a house to pay for the one rent, right?
I think an example that can kind of, I'm not saying it's better than yours, but like it's easier, simpler. People who steal food from the grocery store because they have to feed their family. Something like that.
Yeah, essentially. So, like, again, back to being like, all right, what kind of advice, or have you ever felt that in a weird way, or, like, that just seems to be, because again, on the other end of it, they're like, well, you shouldn't have, like, dude, he was a bouncer. Like, people were working here. Like, people were working there. Every industry got slammed. Like, everyone, but it affected people differently.
Well, I think we need to look at it from a different point of view, because we're blaming the poor for being poor. Right? So we're gonna, like, I've when I was very early on in my career, I couldn't afford to eat all the time. I dated somebody who would like steal steaks from the fucking Ralph's all the time. Like, we ate good, but we weren't paying for it, but we couldn't afford it. So there's been days I've gone without eating because I couldn't afford it. And I think people blame the poor for being poor so much, but in reality, in other countries, people who are low income have better safety nets. And this country had better safety nets, but people from privilege have slowly chipped away at them. And so it's like, if somebody's in a crisis, we should have better guardrails to kind of make sure that that person doesn't result to crime. Because crime is the last resort, right?
Yeah, that's a desperate
like
attempt.
I think there's an uptick in home break-ins in Milwaukee right now. And when my boyfriend told me that yesterday, my thought process didn't go like, oh, we need more cops. I was like, people are desperate. And I don't blame people. It's like the same people who were looting during, the protest last year. People weren't looting because they wanted some new Nikes, right? People were looting because they wanted those Nikes so they can sell them so that they can feed their families because they lost their jobs. And so, like, why did people have to do that? Because we had to shut down the country to prevent a virus, but we didn't have the safety nets to prevent the most vulnerable people from falling into poverty.
Word.
So I don't think we should look at it as like, oh, how do we advise people resulting to crime, to not do crime? It's like they shouldn't, we have so much wealth in this country that they shouldn't be there in the first place. And there's enough to go around. And if we have better safety nets, if we have better community leadership to kind of help these people, and it's like, I'm not religious, but I 100% give it to a lot of churches and stuff for opening their doors to people and feeding them and giving them shelter and giving them clothes in a time of need, when our government literally turned their backs on us and lied to us. Like, some people just need, and you'd be surprised how much $20 can make a difference from somebody, stealing tampons or stealing, like, an apple or something. Like it's such a small threshold that people turn to crime, and they're not doing it like, oh, I'm gonna go rob a bank. Like it's like these small petty crime thefts that people are doing just to survive.
Because and they're desperate, and that's like the only thing that they can do. Like for example, I'll take last year and reading, like I keep up with current events, and like reading the numbers of people that were on unemployment. There were people getting more on unemployment than they were getting from like their regular job. People were getting like $1,800 checks in places like, man, can you imagine an $1,800 check every 2 weeks for someone that was only making, let's say, $45,000 a year? Their checks are already like $1,100, and they're making ends meet. They're just barely making it. And now like I'm getting unemployment, and I'm getting $1,800, and I feel like, as America, the government is missing the mark in a way where it's like, wow, if we do start paying people, or just even companies in general, a livable wage, like for example, I'm pretty sure everyone in here got a stimulus or whatever.
Nope.
Oh, not Cecy. Cecy didn't get one 3 times now.
I didn't get one either.
Didn't get any.
Mine's lost in the mail.
All right, never mind.
Good job,
Wow.
U.S. government. You're doing such a great job.
When you look at like getting a stimulus,
If you think about kind of what people were spending that money on, right? Like, because oh god, the nasty comments that I was seeing were like I was ready to like set the city on fire, because it's like people were like, oh, we're just giving away money for free, I pay my taxes, blah blah blah. And I'm like, the low income people who were receiving this money were immediately pumping it back into the economy. They were going and buying food. They were going and buying personal like hygiene products. They were buying like a new pair of shoes they probably needed. They was buying gas so they can get to work. They were taking it to like allow them to have one day off, like for the first time in a year. But if you think of the people in the middle class, or, whatever the middle class is anymore, or, upper middle class, they were immediately putting it into their savings, which wasn't helping the economy at all. And so, people demonized these low income people for getting this much needed money when upper middle class people were getting it, and they didn't even need it. And that's like what's infuriating. It's like, if you weren't laid off from your job, like I am a point of privilege. Like I wasn't laid off from my job. I got to work from home this whole year. The stimulus check was nice, right? Like I, went and bought like a purse or something, but it wasn't make or break for me. Whereas I have friends who don't work a corporate job, and they got hit hard because they couldn't work from home initially when the lockdown happened, and they were stressed, constantly checking their bank account to see when the stimulus check came in, because they were concerned they were going to run out of money to buy food. And so these are the people who's propping up the economy, like this is why this is important. And people were desperate. Like I think again, it's like our government failed us in all sense of the words, and I don't think we should sugarcoat that. I think we should really like take a step back and really evaluate that, because even the people who worked hard and qualified for unemployment, they went 6 months like without unemployment, of calling every single day, multiple hours a day, and the U.S. government hasn't invested in the infrastructure to make sure that we could handle an increase of calls like that.
It's crazy that you say that. Oh my gosh.
Or just even like look at Texas, and look what Star had to go through, for like a few days, and just the infrastructure, with that. Or just look at and that's not even the first time that has happened. I mean, I go back to 2005. I look at Hurricane Katrina.
Yep.
And Hurricane Katrina, there is a podcast that came out. I think it came out last year. I think it's called I'll have to let you guys know later. But they literally go into, it's a 7 episodes. They go into like the whole events of what happened. I think the first hour is like hour by hour of like when the levees broke and stuff like that. And people blame the residents so much. But then it actually came out later that the Army Corps of Engineers actually mishandled the building of that levee, and it wasn't even built to code.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's why it failed and killed so many people. But like that investigation came out later after the hype was died down, after people stopped caring, after it was all in the newsreel. And what people don't also talk about is that the fact that when they rebuilt the city, they rebuilt it completely without the Black residents who were displaced in mind. And they opened the door to younger, more, affluent people to come in and take their places. And the people who lived in the Ninth Ward, in the places in Louisiana that was most affected, can't even move into the neighborhoods that they once lived in, they grew up in, because either they're still, kind of not like rebuilt, or they've been completely rebuilt with the eye on a wider, more affluent demographic.
Yeah. It just, just even like, and then we'll fast forward like to present day and looking at Texas, like 80% of Texas is on its own power grid, and that's been like that since like the early 80s. They have 10% renewables, meaning, windmills and whatnot, but 80% from nuclear power plants, coal, all of that froze over. Like the water that are in nuclear plants that cools down nuclear reactors, the weather was just so cold. Star can tell you, the weather was just so cold.
Oh,
all of that like froze over. Mind you, that happened in 2011, and it also happened in 1994. And you can't tell me that you cannot winterize your equipment. There are other states that suffer through long winters.
I live in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and you live in Milwaukee. We have Alaska. There's other countries
that make it work,
like Norway and stuff like that. That have been able to survive long winters with like a nuclear, like with that type of energy,
right.
And like with fossil fuel energy. And it's just like, what? Like, why do we have to? Why, like America looks so good on paper, but man, it's like
ghetto here.
It's like wish.com.
It's super ghetto. Aliens are flying past. But what was the conversation after, the polar vortex hit Texas? Because, the same time the polar vortex hit you, Star, we had a deep freeze here, too. Like, it was crazy. Like, I was walking outside, my car battery died. I was cussing at people. I was cold.
Coming from LA, like.
But, like, but the conversation around, like, Texas was that initially was, like, they're like, oh, but the renewables failed. And, like, the wind turbines.
10% of,
No.
Yeah, sorry.
But they're like, the wind turbines failed right now.
Yeah.
And that's what all the fossil fuel advocates were backing. They're like, well, the wind turbines froze over. And it's like, yes, everything froze over.
Yes.
And that's like the conversation is that it's like, oh, well, with fossil fuels, you can turn it on at any time. And it's like, well, you couldn't turn it on when it was too cold.
Exactly.
You couldn't turn it on during the summer when it was a heat wave because it was too hot.
Exactly.
And so and then I think there's a county in Texas that isn't on its own power grid. I want to say it was El Paso.
El Paso.
But I'm not sure.
It was El Paso.
And
it was El Paso.
They didn't have any power outages. And so it really was the corporate greed that came into effect that caused people to lose power.
Exactly.
And it wasn't because people weren't capable of doing the infrastructure. It's because they privatized the electrical grid and chose not to invest into it.
Star, I gotta ask you,
Exactly.
because we're talking about it. How long were you out of power?
Consistently at one time, it was probably about 28, 30 hours, like consistently. And then for the rest of the week, because that happened on a Monday, for the rest of the week, I would have power maybe in like 15 to 40-minute increments sporadically for the rest of the week. And I only went without water for 2 days also. But I had friends that didn't have water for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So I thankfully did not experience the level of devastation that a lot of Texans did. But when I tell you, it was 39 degrees inside my house and I could see my breath. That was a problem for me. And I didn't go outside because I live on the 3rd floor and we didn't have people coming around salting our stairs, and I couldn't get outside. I couldn't get down my stairwell.
Oh my gosh, Star, you just made me think about something. Your complex doesn't have an elevator, but what if you were stuck in an elevator when the power went out?
Yeah.
And it's cold.
She was just gonna be in there.
Ooh,
Yeah.
girl.
Well, there are people, that's such a great point, because tying it back to your original question, people of poverty, do you know how many people died just trying to stay warm or that didn't get fed? It's ridiculous. And I don't live in poverty. I'm thankful that I'm balling. Like, I didn't get no stimulus check because I'm balling. But we're not gonna go. I didn't get no stimmy because I don't know.
A boss.
But like, I live in that nice, comfortable area between. Yeah, do I sometimes not eat? Did I have to ration my food and my water during that time? Yes, I did. However, I was able to get food and whatnot. But there are people that are still recovering from the devastation. Like, it's really sad. And there's people that were able to rebuild their homes from flooding, pipes flooding and whatnot. But there's a lot of people that still aren't. They're still displaced. And that was how long ago?
Yep.
It's because they can't afford to rebuild, or their insurance companies don't cover what happened. And that mixed with the pandemic, because there's still so many people out of work. I never got to go on unemployment, but people in my house did. And that, talk about being pissed off, like working my butt off, and they're making more than me by being unemployed. Like, I had to let that go to Jesus. She's
like, this is it. This is
like, I'm not gonna get into it.
She was like, this is either.
And see, and I strongly feel like it doesn't have to be that way. Like, this country blasters and posters this image of like America the beautiful, America the strong, but I strongly believe that, like, going back to Katrina, if I'm stuck on, for example, this office building, I'm on the 3rd floor. I'm on the top floor, and here in Marina Del Rey, there is a tsunami zone. If a tsunami hits this right now, and I'm stuck here, and I can only get out through the roof, I want my government to come save me, because they are the only ones that have the capacity to do that. I pay my taxes. So I feel that like there made no sense for people in Katrina to be stuck at the Superdome for 7 days without any food or water. Like, they're like.
What also people don't talk about is that the convention center had people, but it wasn't an official like
housing
refugee site.
Yeah.
And like, they went days without being helped, and the government didn't even know that they were there until they started to get asked by reporters, because people at the Superdome started like contacting people and was like, we're not getting help. They had no food, no water. At least, like, as repulsive as the conditions at the Superdome were, the conditions at the convention center were 10 times worse.
Yeah.
And that's terrible to think about.
Which brings me to, like, my next thing that I always say is that, there are going to be people in this country, and just people just in general, whether it's a natural disaster or just regular times, they are going to need help. There are going to be people in this country that they're not going to be able to pick themselves up off of their bootstraps and help themselves. Like, and that sucks because, like, for me, like, I work hard, and of course, I think someone else needs to work hard too. But, like, I have realized that, man, like, there are people that aren't going to be able to do that. And I'm not saying, like, just throw money at a solution, but it's like, there doesn't need to be here. I got an example with me mainly working for a university. I read a tweet and it said this girl was working. And it kind of talked about the disconnect between university professors and students, mainly big universities. So the girl was working at Starbucks, and her professor came in, and her professor got coffee, and she recognized, oh wow, you're working at school, you're going to school full time, and you're working. Like, I'm very proud of you. But the girl tweeted, and she was like, well, yeah, classes are like $2,000 a unit, and it's like that disconnect that a lot of people have when you get to a certain status where you have to realize that not everyone's gonna make it just as you once did. And it's like there are going to be people in this country that won't be able to do that. That's why I think, I don't think throwing money at a solution, but I think we need to recognize that and get people the help, whether that's job training, whether that's like, easy access to education.
It comes back. It always circles back to infrastructure every single time.
And it all circles back to infrastructure.
We're the richest nation in the world. We shouldn't have people in poverty and living on the streets. And we have the money for it.
Like, you go back and you look at, I take LA County, like, traffic is so bad here. Yeah, because there are a lot of people, and there are a lot of people moving here from different places, but a lot of people can't afford to live where they work.
Right.
That's why traffic is so bad here. People have to live out in, like, Covina, West Covina, even Orange County, to travel to LA to work.
But then the upper middle class doesn't want to invest in public transportation for the low income workers to get to work.
Yeah.
Because it's seen as a burden, because that's not what I want my tax dollars spent on.
Yeah, and in some cases.
Or they don't want to build affordable housing so that people can live in the neighborhoods, because they don't want low income people living in their backyard.
No, I will say in LA, it's just starting to turn.
The reason why it's improving this year is that a lot of people who are, more affluent, who can't afford the outrageous rent prices in LA are moving out and moving to other places. They can afford to move out of the city and work from home. And now that's kind of leaving a void so that low-income people can possibly move in, and it's driving rent prices down because they can't fill these units anymore. So it's like, it's unfortunate that, our capitalist society has made it that the only way people can live where, they grew up or where they worked is if, like, rich people move away. But it's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And that is true, mainly in Los Angeles. Like, I'm in the thick of it in certain areas that I hang out, and I see how parking is in certain areas, and it's like, man, it's usually not a lot of parking over here. But the pandemic really did have people move and try to get, leave and find, elsewhere, or even just go back home. Because, man, you miss one rent payment out here, it sucks. You're on the streets.
Which I'm just going to throw in there real quick that if you're paying $2,000 for rent in Milwaukee or Wisconsin, you could have literally a farm.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Acres. I bet that's wonderful.
Acreage.
My friend Jessica,
man.
She lives in Michigan, and her boyfriend live in a 3-bedroom full-on house for like $800.
Yep, 100%. Yep. And it's opened my eyes because I'm born and raised LA. My whole family's out there, and we grew up with the cost of living in Los Angeles, the taxes in Los Angeles, and moving out here has definitely opened my eyes to kind of what it's like to live life when half of your income isn't going to rent.
Right. Or 3/4 of your income. Jeez.
And you can just the quality of life, the things people do. Like people, they'll do the piano lessons. They'll go out to expensive dinners, and they'll do these like a historically middle class that they showed us in the 80s lifestyle that everyone's doing. Like all those 80s movies about middle class were all based in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Because
if people were
had,
just
like,
given the opportunity, like if I guarantee you, if people were paid what they needed to be paid, if they had like the basic needs,
if the salary matched the cost of living,
if the salary matched the cost of living, people had the basic needs of what they need. I guarantee you that utopia that you see in the movies, that American dream that people push on you and all of that, I guarantee you that's what would happen. But you got people working 2, 3, 4 jobs, and then it kind of goes back to the question earlier, like, yeah, COVID ran rapid in the Hispanic community in South LA. Why? It's because you had, more than one person living in a home, and everyone's out there busting their asses to work. And what are they doing? They're working these jobs, these frontlines jobs, like the food lines, or they're doing whatever to do. They're doing whatever.
They're at the guess what? Animal processing. They're at the grocery stores.
Exactly. They're at the grocery stores. And then what happens? They're bringing the virus back home.
And then now all 5 people living in that house are getting it.
And all five people are living in the house that are getting it.
On another side of the coin, do you guys have friends or family even in places of authority where they see things through a different perspective that they may have shared with you that we might not know?
Right, isn't like common knowledge or anything.
Yeah, actually, I feel like this is always a good topic because I do. And it's the same as if they weren't. It's so crazy because it would be the same as if they weren't in those position of power. If they weren't cops, they would still be thinking the same way. And some of them would think the way I think, and some of them won't think the way I think. And sometimes I do find that frustrating. For example, I'll take the topic of Blue Lives Matter. And I'm going to take January 6, 2021, when a bunch of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, because of a bold-faced lie. But it's crazy because 4 cops died. One cop had his eyes gouged out, like his eye out of his socket.
No
and
way.
From friends that, I know that are in law enforcement, I am not judging them in any way, but they have not said shit about it at all. Nothing. It has been complete silence. And as I said, and a full disclaimer, I'm not judging them in no way whatsoever. But I find that extremely, like, I took offense to it. Like, I really did. Just, for the cops that died.
Yeah. Because
any other time a cop has died, it's like, it's in your face on social media. It's in your face, like, with a conversation. Yeah. But it's just crazy. Honestly, it's not crazy. It's really it really just shows at times, well, dang, maybe Blue Lives Matter was just there to suppress Black Lives Matter. Because like I still like I'm still at a huge disbelief at times where it's like, man, some of you guys aren't saying anything.
Yeah.
Like yesterday, I was ignorant yesterday because 2 more Capitol police officers have died. and
I think one died, one had injuries.
one died and one was injured, and I had tweeted, "Wow, they killed another cop." But it turns out like this guy who was actually a black gentleman, was doing suicide by cop, and he was a part of the Nation of Islam. But there were pundits on social media, non-friends of mine, but just pundits, painting, the Nation of Islam and just like in a bad way and whatnot. And it's crazy because those same pundits didn't say shit on January 6th.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's when like I get what Stark comes from when she talks about like the media and sometimes the mainstream media. There's this one in particular, I'm not going to name them, but they were one of the main perpetrators yesterday, bashing the guy that killed the guy, but they didn't say anything about the four cops that died and the one cop that had his eyes gold out of his socket.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
We got to call both sides here.
Yep.
Exactly.
Granted, CNN probably doesn't do a good job at that at times, but still,
I'm cool calling it what it is.
Yeah.
If somebody who is black breaks the law,
exactly.
like I'm
They're
like
all
they broke the law,
over
like
it.
they're a criminal. But I'm like, I feel like if somebody is white, they're like, well,
Yeah.
he was prom king.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
He walked old ladies across the street. And it's like, why does any of that matter? Like, he broke the law. Like, that's all that matters. He broke the law. Treat us equally. That is all we're asking for. Is that, like, if you're gonna, and that was a lot of the conversations around January 6th. It's like, if you were gonna beat our ass during a Black Lives Matter protest when we're at the Capitol, then I want to damn well see you beating white ass when they're literally breaking through the windows. Like, or if you're not gonna beat their ass, then don't beat our ass.
right.
Like, it's that,
Both ways, baby,
it's
both
that
ways.
simple.
Exactly.
Right. It's, and people are like, well, we need to, is it the training? Is it this? It's like, no, it's like simple. You don't beat their ass, then don't beat our ass. If you're gonna beat our ass, then beat their ass. Like, it is literally that simple.
That ties into
like, fair and equal treatment.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for the future as like for the world, but also for yourself?
How can people like us be better allies?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think my hope really is just to continue to spread awareness, just bring topics and educate people. And I know that's really rough because a lot of people feel like they have been educating people their whole lives. But if we don't continue, then who's going to do it? It really, if you want to see change, you want to see people be better, then we have to be better. And I think we really need to embrace those people that want to be an ally and that want to learn and that want to change. So that's my hope. I hope for grace
There you go.
on all sides.
I hope for all the books that people bought last year during the social uprising that they actually read them and don't just leave them on their bookshelf. And I hope for people to take a step back and do a little bit more research on, why social norms are the way they are and maybe question things a little more. And my hope for the future is that I'm really banking on the next generation because they seem a lot more woke than we are and a lot more accepting. And, I just want to make way for them to kind of come in and take over because they're going to regardless.
Yeah.
I pray for a true revival. And with that revival, things must come, the truth must come out first. And I do think 2020 has been giving us 2020 vision in a lot of things and making people feel uncomfortable because a lot of things were happening at once. So piggybacking off a star, yes, please send the grace, but continue to increase people's awareness of this isn't new. This is happening. This has been happening. And let's continue to keep people aware of what's going on.
That's great. That's great. You guys, thank you so much for coming on Talks and Sips today with us and taking the time and really just like filling us with wisdom and perspectives. And, hopefully this is fruit and fuel for someone, or newfound knowledge for that matter, if they didn't already know. Mm-hmm. You got anything for them?
Did you want to ask the final question first?
Yeah.
Or do you mean for them?
Yeah, for them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Cece's like, what? This isn't script. No.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you guys again. I know during our little break, there's hunger. Yeah, it's late for you guys, or for Sheena and Star. Yeah, so thank you for staying up late with us.
And so, sorry, just to like jump in for the listeners and the viewers. We're recording. We started this recording at 6 p.m. PST, and Sheena and Star are in Milwaukee and Texas, 2 hours ahead of time. So for them right now, it's easily 11:44. They're going on to midnight with us. So thank you so much, you guys. We really appreciate your insight. And yeah, like hopefully this does something for someone, and that's really, really the objective here. In that. Even for you guys, it's even reflective almost. But before we go, I always ask the listeners/viewers a final question. And because of the topics that we've talked about, this felt like just the right question to ask. What is something that on an individual scale we can each reflect and work on in order to foster empathy for others, especially those who we differ from via perspective and in beliefs? I hope you guys really, really, really like that question and that you guys can respond to it.
Yeah, and as always, thanks for listening and watching. And you can follow us at Talks and Sips on Instagram. And for our personal social media, mine is at Cecy.Enciso.
Star?
Mine is at @star_Dawn.
Sheena?
Mine is at _Sheenerface.
Ron?
Mine is at Rendezvous. So that's Ron_Day_Vu.
He's so fancy.
But there is a one. There is a one at the end of that. Yeah, there's a one.
He sounds like me. And mine is at JAYFOXX_.
Not gonna risk messing it.
No, I miss it every time. So. And before we go, I gotta ask, what are you guys sipping?
Yeah, I mean, Jess and I are drinking. What are we drinking? I don't even know what we're drinking.
Juice, gin and juice. No, I'm just kidding. It's a vodka juice. Oh. Wow, we got risque for this one, guys.
We did.
How about you guys?
I'm on my Cutwater.
I'm drinking hibiscus.
Oh.
You go first. Okay. You go first.
I'm on my Cutwater lime tequila margarita.
Nice.
Hibiscus margarita.
Ooh.
12-year-old scotch.
Nice.
Hey, what does your cup say, Ron?
Oh, it says straight out of country club.
Wait. Before we end, Ron, how was the game? Is it over? I'm assuming it's over.
Yeah, this has been a long recording. Did you win or lose?
UCLA lost.
Oh, no.
So, yeah.
Oh, no.
So I lost $50, but if each of you want to Venmo me $10 each.
Wow, there you go. You make back your losses.
If each of you want to Venmo, I can get a good.
Oh goodness! Wow.
Yes.
Well, you guys.
But they played their hearts out.
That's great. No, that's good, and I'm glad that sports are back, and that actually, as of like this week, the arts are back. So we're getting there, guys. It's been a slow turn of it, but we are almost there. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today on Talks and Sips, and thank you to our guests for being here with us today. Yep. That's it, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Thank you so much.